The first rays of the morning sun cut through the thin California mist, scattering gold and amber across the sprawling military range. SEAL Admiral Marcus Hale, a man whose presence could silence a room without a word, strode across the concrete pad. His boots clicked with authority, each echo punctuating the brisk morning air. He wasn't supposed to be here. This was a routine training day for Tier 2 candidates, an inspection he had delegated to his subordinates. Yet something tugged at him, a subtle instinct born of decades in covert operations, compelling him to witness today's exercises firsthand. Ahead, the line of trainees fidgeted nervously, their shoulders tense beneath the weight of rifles. Dust swirled around them, kicked up by boots that shuffled and tapped on concrete as they waited for the morning's drills to begin. Hale's eyes scanned the field, noting the familiar and predictable chaos of rookie tension. And then he saw her. She was alone, separated by a wide gap from the cluster of other trainees. Her posture was unremarkable at first glance, a prone position, elbows resting against the ground. But there was something in the way she cradled the M107 Barrett .50 caliber rifle that caught his attention immediately. The massive weapon, known to veterans as the king of long-range rifles, was no stranger to expert hands, but civilians, especially new recruits, rarely handled it with such ease. Yet she adjusted it with a quiet confidence that seemed almost unnatural, her fingers dancing over the steel with intimate familiarity. Hale frowned. Her application had been flagged as civilian, no prior military experience, no competitive shooting background. Nothing in the files hinted at extraordinary skill, and yet there she was, moving as if she had been born to command the rifle. "Who's that?" Hale asked the chief standing beside him. "New applicant," the chief said, shrugging. "Civilian background, doesn't even have a formal record in marksmanship. Name's Evelyn Carter." Hale's brow furrowed. Civilians didn't handle an M107 like that. Something about her unnerved him. He had seen rookies tremble at the weight of the weapon, recoil knocking them off balance, eyes wide with fear. But she, Evelyn, seemed perfectly synchronized with the rifle, as if it were an extension of herself. He stepped closer. The wind carried a faint metallic scent of gun oil, mingled with the earthy aroma of the range. She looked up, catching his gaze, and for a heartbeat their eyes locked. Hale felt a chill, not of cold but of recognition. There was a calm intensity in her eyes, a depth that betrayed more than mere talent. And then she raised the rifle, taking aim at the steel target far across the range. The target shimmered in the morning light, a tiny metallic dot against the undulating hills. Hale squinted, disbelief stirring as he realized she was lining up for a shot most of his seasoned snipers would hesitate to attempt. "Ready," she whispered to herself. The recoil echoed across the range like a distant thunderclap. Dust erupted in tiny clouds around the steel plates. Hale instinctively shielded his eyes, expecting chaos, expecting the rifle to kick violently and throw her off balance. But she didn't flinch, not an inch. Her cheek remained pressed against the stock, eyes tracking the target with surgical precision. A spotter raised binoculars and his jaw slackened. "Sir, she hit the bullseye at 2,050 yards, he stammered, voice trembling. "Dead center." Hale froze, the words sinking in like a cold dagger. 2,050 yards. Most snipers would spend years mastering shots at half that distance, and she had done it on her first attempt. He approached her cautiously, every instinct screaming for explanation. "You've fired one of these before?" he asked. "Once," she replied almost casually. Hale's eyes narrowed. Only once. And yet she had just executed a shot that many veterans failed at in a lifetime. His mind raced, questions forming faster than he could voice them. Who was this woman? What kind of training or life produced such precision? Before he could question her further, she straightened and smiled faintly, almost shyly. "Sir, can I try something harder?" Hale's chest tightened. Her tone wasn't cocky, it was matter of fact, almost daring him to refuse. He glanced at the instructors nearby. They exchanged uneasy looks. Some shook their heads, others whispered, too shocked to intervene. Hale finally spoke. "Harder, you understand the risk, don't you?" "I do," she said. Her eyes gleamed with something deeper than confidence, purpose, determination, a quiet fire that seemed to radiate outward from her very presence. The instructors moved hesitantly as she requested a smaller steel plate, positioned beyond the standard maximum distance of 2,400 yards. The hill stretched endlessly before her, a daunting expanse, the target a shimmering speck barely visible even with binoculars. Hale watched as she assumed her position, her body still, breathing slow and deliberate, muscles taut like a predator ready to strike. The wind picked up slightly, carrying sand and dust across the range. Hale noted every minute detail, the faint tremor in a trainee's hand, the restless shuffle of others. Evelyn, by contrast, was composed, almost eerily calm. He couldn't take his eyes off her. The sense of anticipation in the air was palpable, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then she exhaled, a single controlled breath. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Hale's pulse quickened. Every fiber of his being told him to look away, to brace for disaster, but he couldn't. He had to see it. The shot rang out, a thunderous crack reverberating across the hills. Dust erupted near the target. Hale squinted through the rising cloud. A cheer rose from the instructors. The spotter yelled, disbelief breaking his voice. "Dead center, 2,400 yards, bullseye." Hale's jaw dropped. He could barely process what he was seeing. Not just precision, perfection. And she didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply reloaded, methodical, calm, as if she had expected it to happen exactly that way. He stepped closer again, his voice low. "Who trained you?" Her gaze lifted, meeting his with a storm of emotion that she did not speak. "No one formal," she said. "My father taught me." Hale blinked, his gut twisted. "Your father?" She nodded slightly. There was a subtle tremor in her hands now, an almost imperceptible shadow behind the calm. He didn't finish teaching me, but I learned enough." Something in Hale's chest tightened. This wasn't just skill. This was history, legacy, pain, and maybe a warning. "Can we speak privately?" she asked softly, almost hesitantly. Hale hesitated. Every instinct screamed yes. This was more than a training exercise. Whatever Evelyn Carter was, she was carrying something extraordinary, something dangerous. "All right," he said, voice measured but laced with tension. "Let's talk." As they walked toward the administrative building, Hale stole one last glance at the range. The other trainees fumbled with their rifles, but Evelyn stood out like a solitary flame against the morning mist. Her presence commanded attention, and Hale knew deep down that this day, this shot, was only the beginning. Something about Evelyn Carter felt inevitable. And Hale realized, with a sinking sense of both awe and dread, that she was about to change everything he thought he knew about skill, precision, and the deadly world he lived in. The line between a trainee and a legend had just been crossed. The conference room was quiet, almost unbearably so, save for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Admiral Marcus Hale sat across from Evelyn Carter, his sharp eyes narrowing as he tried to process what he had just witnessed on the range. Every instinct in his decades of military experience screamed that something about this woman was off. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. 2,050 yards, dead center, on your first shot. You realize how impossible that is. Evelyn shrugged lightly, her calmness unshaken. "I told you, my father taught me." Hale's jaw tightened. He had seen snipers with 20 years of experience struggle to maintain accuracy at half that distance. And yet, she had just executed a perfect shot at extreme range without even flinching. Something didn't add up. He stood abruptly, packing the room, hands clasped behind his back. "Explain to me how someone with zero formal training, zero military record, can perform at a level that most seasoned SEALs can only dream of. Evelyn's gaze followed him, cool, almost unnervingly steady. "Sir, some things can't be taught in a school. They're learned." Her voice was soft, but it carried a quiet intensity that seemed to reverberate through the room. "Some things are inherited." Hale stopped packing, incredulous. "Inherited, you mean genetic?" "Not exactly," she said. She tilted her head, eyes distant. "It's about understanding, reading the wind, calculating distance, recoil, drop, seeing a target as if it's already been hit before the trigger is even pulled." He let out a low whistle, half disbelief, half admiration. "And your first attempt at a target beyond 2,000 yards just happened to land perfectly." She smiled faintly. "That's what practice in the right environment can do." Her fingers traced the seam of her jacket, almost nervously, betraying a sliver of emotion beneath her controlled exterior. "My father, he never let me aim small. He taught me to see the bigger picture, to predict outcomes before they happen." Hale sank back into his chair, absorbing her words. Something about her demeanor made him uneasy, but also fascinated. "I've seen snipers with 20 years of experience miss shots like that, and you're telling me you learned this from your father alone?" She nodded. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Hale's mind raced. Civilians didn't move like that, didn't shoot like that, didn't exude that kind of raw precision. But Evelyn Carter had just done all three, and without a flinch. The quiet was broken by a faint tapping at the door. A junior officer stepped in, holding a pair of binoculars and a notebook. "Sir, you might want to see this," he said, voice shaking slightly. "The range spotters, they're still talking about it. They've never seen anything like it." Hale motioned for the officer to hand over the binoculars. He peered through them at the distant target, the steel plate still gleaming faintly in the morning sun. Even from here, it was impossible to discern a perfect shot. Yet the report said otherwise. Dead center. First attempt. He removed the binoculars, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I don't understand. How does someone like her exist?" Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the table. "Sir, I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because I was told you might be the only person who can help me." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Help you with what?" She hesitated, a rare crack in her otherwise unshakable composure. "With a man. He killed my father." Hale felt a jolt run through his chest. "Killed your father?" His voice was low, tense. "And you expect me to what? Track him down?" She looked him directly in the eyes, unflinching. "I can't do it alone, and he's still out there, waiting." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And he's coming for me." Hale felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Something in her tone, in her eyes, told him she wasn't exaggerating. He had seen fear in people's eyes before, the kind that freezes you in place. But this was different. This was controlled fear. Fear shaped into precision. He exhaled slowly. "All right, let's say I believe you. Explain to me why you are shooting at distances most snipers would consider suicidal. What purpose does this serve?" Evelyn's fingers drummed lightly on the table. "Every shot I take, it's proof," she said softly. "Proof that I can hit my target, proof that I'm ready. Ready to confront him, ready to finish what he started, ready to survive." Hale leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "And these targets, the ones you picked for your first shots, you chose them for practice, or were they something else?" She paused, swallowing. "They were practice and a message." Her eyes glinted with a mix of sadness and defiance. "He needs to know I'm coming for him, that I won't miss." Hale's pulse quickened. There was a weight behind her words, a real danger that wasn't theoretical. This was not training anymore. This was preparation for a confrontation, one that could cost lives. He rubbed his temples. "You understand that involving yourself in something like this, without full military backing, could get you killed, or worse, get others killed." "I know," she said, unwavering. "That's why I came to you. because you have the authority and the experience to guide me." Hale's mind raced. He had always operated with calculated caution, yet something about Evelyn's presence, her precision, and the raw intensity of her purpose compelled him to act. This wasn't just a civilian with a rifle. This was someone trained by life itself, hardened by loss, and perhaps capable of more than anyone he had ever encountered. He leaned back, letting the tension ease slightly, though the unease lingered. "All right," he said finally. "You've proven your skill, and I've seen enough to believe you might actually be telling the truth. But we need more than skill. We need intel, we need a plan, and we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Evelyn nodded, a hint of relief in her eyes. "I can provide some of that, but not everything, not yet. Some things are still sensitive." Hale's instincts screamed that sensitive meant dangerous, deadly dangerous. But the combination of her skill, her composure, and the raw intensity he had witnessed on the firing line left him with no choice but to trust her, for now. Before he could speak, she added quietly, almost to herself, "I've already sent a message through the one channel he monitors. He knows I'm here, and he knows I'm coming." Hale's heart skipped a beat. "You mean he knows you're ready?" "Yes," she said softly, "and he's waiting, watching, testing me, just like I'm testing myself." The room went silent. Hale stared at her, absorbing the weight of her words. She wasn't just a marksman, she was a predator, and she had a target. Hale finally broke the silence. "Then we need to move fast. You're already in motion, and if he knows you're coming, time is short." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, almost imperceptible. "I know," she said, "and I'm ready, Admiral, more than ready." Hale leaned back, letting out a slow breath. He had trained soldiers for decades, faced threats few could even imagine. And yet, staring at Evelyn Carter, he felt a rare, uneasy mix of admiration, awe, and gnawing fear. She was more than just a mystery, she was a force. And he had a sinking feeling that once she stepped into motion, nothing would ever be the same again. Outside the window, the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the vast range. Somewhere beyond the hills, a target waited, and somewhere in the shadows, an unseen enemy watched. Evelyn Carter's perfect shot wasn't just an accident. It was the opening move in a dangerous game. And Admiral Hale knew he was about to be pulled into it. The calm before the storm had ended. The hunt was beginning. The sun had climbed higher, burning through the morning mist, casting sharp shadows across the sprawling SEAL training range. Admiral Marcus Hale stood a few yards behind Evelyn Carter, his gaze fixed on the distant hills that stretched like a rolling ocean of brown and gold. Every muscle in his body remained taut, alert. He had seen some of the finest marksmen in the world, yet Evelyn's precision earlier that morning had left him unnerved. Something about her movements, the calm certainty in her breathing, and the way she commanded the massive M107 Barrett .50 caliber rifle made her almost untouchable. "Ready for the next one?" he asked, his voice steady but layered with tension. Evelyn didn't immediately answer. She knelt down beside her rifle case, methodically removing components and inspecting them with meticulous care. "It's more than ready," she said softly, eyes scanning the horizon. "I want to push further, beyond what anyone here thinks is possible." Hale's pulse quickened. He had been through countless training scenarios, watched soldiers falter under impossible conditions, and yet he couldn't shake the growing sense that Evelyn wasn't just confident, she was extraordinary. "Beyond what's possible," he repeated, his tone a mix of disbelief and caution. "Explain." She pointed toward the farthest hill in the distance. The target she indicated was a tiny, almost imperceptible steel plate, barely the size of Hale's palm, glinting faintly against the jagged ridgeline. Even with binoculars, it required concentration to pick out the exact spot. "I want to hit that plate," she said, "at 2,400 yards, dead center." The instructors behind Hale exchanged shocked glances. One of them whispered, barely audible, No one hits that at that distance. It's impossible. Hale clenched his jaw. Impossible, he muttered. And yet he remembered her earlier shots, the first one at 2,050 yards dead center. She had done what no civilian and few seasoned snipers could manage. The odds were stacked impossibly high, and she was ready to push them even further. The air carried a faint scent of gunpowder and the dry, earthy aroma of the range. Hale walked closer to Evelyn. You understand this is dangerous, right? Even minor errors at this distance could result in unpredictable results. I know, she said. Her voice was calm, almost serene, but there was an undercurrent of steel beneath it. I've calculated everything. Wind, trajectory, elevation, even mirage. If I miss, it won't be because of a miscalculation. Hale exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of awe and apprehension. There was a calm determination in her voice that both unnerved and impressed him. Very well, he said. Proceed. But every move, every step needs to be observed. We need data, and you will follow all safety protocols. She nodded, acknowledging him without hesitation. Evelyn lay prone on the ground, the massive Barrett resting against her shoulder. Her gloved hands adjusted the scope, scanning the ridgeline with meticulous precision. The target, a tiny steel plate glinting in the sun, seemed almost impossibly small at that distance. Hale squinted through binoculars, disbelief gnawing at him. Even seasoned snipers at this range would consider this target absurdly difficult. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling dry grass across the range. Hale noted its direction, the subtle shift in velocity. Most shooters would hesitate, adjusting calculations, second-guessing themselves. But Evelyn remained calm. She exhaled slowly, her focus absolute. The sound of her trigger snapping echoed across the hills like a distant thunderclap. Dust kicked up near the target, the metal plate vibrating slightly. Hale's heart raced, the tension in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. Then came the shout. Dead center, the spotter's voice cracked with disbelief. 2,400 yards, perfect shot. Hale stared in shock. The impossible had happened again. Evelyn didn't react, didn't even acknowledge the small cheer from the instructors. She simply reloaded, methodical and composed, preparing for the next challenge. Hale approached her cautiously, his mind racing. You don't celebrate, you don't even smile. Is this instinct or discipline? Her eyes met his, a storm of determination behind them. Both, she said quietly. I've learned that emotion can interfere with precision. The moment you allow it to control you, you miss, and mistakes at this distance can't be corrected. Hale swallowed, trying to absorb the enormity of what she had just accomplished. He had trained elite soldiers for decades, yet he had never encountered anyone who could perform under pressure with such flawless execution and with such calm composure. A junior officer spoke up hesitantly. Sir, she's asking for another challenge, something outside the standard parameters. Hale's brow furrowed. What is it? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She reached into her case and pulled out a new set of targets, 3 small steel plates, each barely larger than a coin. She placed them at staggered distances along the ridgeline, farther than anyone present had ever attempted. I want to hit all 3, she said. In sequence, 1 shot per target, maximum distance, dead center. The instructors froze. One whispered in disbelief, she's insane. Hale felt a chill run down his spine. Or she's extraordinary, he muttered. He could see the focus in her eyes, the way her body seemed to flow with the rhythm of the rifle, anticipating every recoil, every minute correction. This wasn't just practice. It was a demonstration of skill, willpower, and perhaps something deeper. Evelyn lay prone, aligning herself with the first target. Hale observed her calculations, noting the subtle adjustments in the scope, the way she accounted for wind and distance. Every move was deliberate, precise. This was no longer just marksmanship, it was artistry. She fired. The sound cracked across the hills, sharp and final. Dust kicked up around the first plate. Hale's heart pounded. Dead center. The spotter's voice was barely audible over his own shock. Evelyn adjusted for the second plate, calm, measured, unwavering. Another shot rang out, another perfect hit. The third target loomed, the most distant of all. Hale held his breath as she focused. He could feel the tension radiating from every person on the range. The impossible seemed to hang in the air. Evelyn exhaled slowly, a bead of sweat sliding down her temple, and fired. The steel plate shivered in the wind, struck precisely in the center. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, the instructors frozen in awe. Hale took a step forward, gripping his own chair for support. How did you do that?" he asked, voice trembling with a mix of amazement and fear. She looked at him, eyes calm, unwavering. "Because I had to," she said simply. "Because missing wasn't an option." Hale felt a mixture of admiration and unease. This woman wasn't just skilled. She was driven by something profound, something he couldn't yet fully understand. There was pain behind her precision, purpose behind her calm, and perhaps a history that had forged her into something beyond ordinary human capability. He realized with a sinking sense of inevitability that Evelyn Carter was not here to simply participate in training. She had a mission, and whatever that mission was, it was going to pull everyone on this range, including him, into a world of danger, precision, and lethal intent. As she reassembled her rifle and prepared to step away from the line, Hale caught the faintest tremor in her hands, almost imperceptible, a crack in the otherwise flawless facade. He sensed a story behind that tremor, a past she hadn't shared, a fire that drove her to master the impossible. "Admiral," she said quietly, almost apologetically, "there's more you need to know about my father and why I'm here." Hale felt a chill. Something in her voice, in that single sentence, carried weight beyond explanation. He had a lifetime of experience dealing with danger, deception, and elite operatives, yet he knew this was different. This was personal. "Tell me everything," he said, "and make it fast. I have a feeling time isn't on our side." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glinting with a fire that was both fearsome and resolute. She began to speak, her voice low, filled with a gravity that made every word echo in the room. "My father didn't die by accident, and the man responsible is still out there, watching, waiting, and he knows I'm coming." Hale's stomach tightened. He had faced threats that could destroy entire units, but something about Evelyn's words, combined with the skill he had just witnessed, told him this wasn't a mere threat. This was a reckoning. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension, the distant hills now a stage for something far more dangerous than anyone present could imagine. And Hale realized with a cold certainty that the calm before the storm was over. Evelyn Carter's perfect shot was only the beginning. The office was dim, the blinds casting slatted shadows across the floor. Admiral Marcus Hale sat at the head of the polished table, his fingers drumming lightly against the surface. He had expected a straightforward explanation, perhaps a civilian with exceptional marksmanship. But what Evelyn Carter had revealed earlier on the range, and more importantly the weight of her final words, had unsettled him deeply. "She says her father didn't die by accident," Hale murmured, mostly to himself, "and that the man responsible is still out there." The junior officer who had accompanied Evelyn handed him a sealed folder, the corners worn but the contents apparently untouched. Hale opened it with deliberate care. Inside was nothing. Not a single official record, not a military dossier, not even a hint of civilian history beyond a name. Evelyn Carter, age 27. Occupation, unknown. He blinked, then leaned back in his chair. "That's impossible. No one with her skill simply doesn't exist on paper." Evelyn had remained silent while Hale examined the folder. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, fingers interlaced, calm yet alert. Her composure seemed unshakable, but Hale caught a fleeting tremor in her jaw, almost imperceptible, a trace of something buried deep beneath the surface. "Admiral," she said softly, "I didn't come here to be tracked in files or to appear on paper. Everything about me was meant to be invisible. Until now." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Invisible, you realize how dangerous that is, how difficult it makes it for me to trust, let alone protect you." "I know," she said, her gaze unwavering. "And yet, you're the only person I could come to." Hale rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had seen dozens of operatives in his career, some reckless, some brilliant, most dangerous. But Evelyn Carter, she didn't fit any category he had ever encountered. She was methodical, precise, and yet profoundly secretive. It was as if she had been trained in a way the Navy itself could not comprehend. "Tell me everything," Hale demanded. "About your father, about this man, and about why you're here." Evelyn's eyes darkened, the calm mask slipping just slightly to reveal a raw edge of grief. "My father was a former Special Projects operative," she began. "He worked on covert operations that most people don't even know exist. He was good at what he did, the best, but he had a moral line he would never cross, and that line got him killed." Hale's pulse quickened. "Killed by whom?" She swallowed, steadying herself. "By someone he trusted, someone who was supposed to be an ally. They discovered something so dangerous, so uncontrollable that it could ruin lives, careers, even governments. My father refused to comply. He paid the price for it." Hale felt a chill. He had faced operatives willing to do anything for power or money, but the weight in Evelyn's voice told him this was different. This wasn't politics or espionage. This was personal and deadly. "And now you're going after him?" Hale asked cautiously. "The man who killed your father?" Evelyn nodded. "I have to. It's not just vengeance, it's prevention. If he succeeds, countless lives could be at risk. I've spent years preparing for this. Every shot I've taken, every calculation I've made has been in anticipation of this confrontation." Hale leaned back in his chair, processing the gravity of her words. "And these perfect shots you've taken, they weren't just practice." "No," she said. "They were a message, a warning, a demonstration of capability. I need him to know I'm coming and that I won't miss." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Hale's mind raced, weighing the impossibility of her skill, the audacity of her mission, and the potential consequences. He had always been a man of action, but this was different. Evelyn Carter wasn't just a civilian with extraordinary talent. She was a force, shaped by loss, driven by purpose, and willing to confront a threat that most of the military world wouldn't even acknowledge existed. He stood abruptly, packing the room. "Evelyn, you understand the magnitude of what you're saying. You're talking about a man who has eluded capture for years, someone who has the resources, the knowledge, and the ruthlessness to kill without hesitation. You're walking into a situation that could get you." "I understand," she interrupted, calm but insistent. "I've spent years preparing, I'm ready." Hale stopped, staring at her. Her unwavering gaze held him in place, a mixture of defiance and desperation that left no room for argument. He knew, instinctively, that she meant every word. "Then we need to act carefully," he said finally. "If you're serious about confronting him, we need intel, resources, and a plan. And right now, I have no file on you, no record of your existence beyond what you've told me. That makes this exponentially more difficult." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's why I came to you. You have the authority, the experience, and the discretion to guide me." Hale's mind flashed to the files he had pulled earlier, the empty folder, the lack of documentation. It was as if Evelyn Carter had been erased from the world until now. A ghost with a rifle, invisible until she chose to appear. And now she had walked directly into his domain, seeking his help to confront a danger even he could barely quantify. He rubbed his temples, the weight of responsibility pressing down. "All right," he said. "We'll start by gathering every shred of information on this man. Any record, any witness, any anomaly. If he's still out there, we need to know where he is, what he's planning, and how he operates." Evelyn nodded, her expression calm but determined. "I already have some information," she said, "but not everything. Some things are sensitive, some things are dangerous to reveal." Hale leaned forward, intrigued. "Sensitive how?" "Let's just say," she said, voice low, almost a whisper, "that revealing everything too soon could put us both in immediate danger. But I can give you enough to start tracking him, enough to prepare." Hale exhaled, feeling the tension in the room thicken. He had faced threats before, but the combination of Evelyn's skill, her determination, and the mystery surrounding her past created a scenario he couldn't ignore. She wasn't just asking for help, she was demanding it, and he was the only one with the authority and experience to provide it. He glanced at the empty folder again. No file, no record, nothing to corroborate your existence, and yet you have the skill, the precision, and the nerve to confront a man capable of killing your father. That's either insanity or genius. "Or necessity," Evelyn said softly. "Sometimes necessity forces people to become what they need to be. I've had no choice but to become precise, lethal, and invisible. That's why I'm here." Hale's mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible. He had trained soldiers for decades, but Evelyn Carter defied categorization. She was civilian and soldier, student and master, victim and predator. And she had walked directly into his office, demanding not only his attention but his active participation in a mission that could very well get them both killed. He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "All right," he said finally. "We'll start with what you know. Then we'll gather intel, identify potential threats, and prepare a plan. But understand this, one misstep and neither of us walks away." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, a mixture of resolve and gratitude. "I understand," she said, "and I'm ready for whatever comes next." Hale felt a chill, a mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation. He had trained men for decades, faced threats that could destroy entire units, and yet staring at Evelyn Carter, he knew this was different. She was extraordinary, dangerous, and utterly determined, and the storm they were about to face would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage he possessed. Outside, the morning sun burned brighter, illuminating the range that had already witnessed impossible feats. Somewhere beyond the hills, the shadow of a threat waited. Evelyn Carter's perfect shot had only been a prelude. And Admiral Hale realized, with a sinking certainty, that the mission they were about to undertake would change everything. The calm of the morning had passed. The hunt and the danger had only just begun. The office was silent, save for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint rustling of papers. Admiral Marcus Hale leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming absently on the polished surface as he stared at Evelyn Carter. The young woman, calm and composed moments ago, now seemed even more intense, a storm of determination barely contained beneath her poised exterior. She slid a photograph across the table. Hale picked it up, examining it closely. The man in the photo was familiar, too familiar. A former U.S. contractor, a ghost from operations long buried and classified. His expression was mild, almost casual, but Hale knew better than to trust appearances. "You know him," Evelyn said softly. Her voice trembled ever so slightly, betraying the calm she had fought to maintain. Hale's pulse tightened. "Everyone in my world knows him, but he's been missing for over a decade." "No," Evelyn whispered. "He's hiding and he's waiting." Hale set the photograph down carefully. "Why him? Why your father?" Evelyn's eyes darkened. "Because my father was his spotter. They discovered something together, something so dangerous that it got them both marked. But my father refused to be used. He wouldn't help finish it. And now my life is the consequence." The weight of her words hung in the room like a storm cloud. Hale had faced death in its purest forms countless times, yet the gravity in her tone made him pause. This wasn't just a vendetta or revenge mission. This was a matter of survival, with stakes far higher than most could imagine. "And the shots?" Hale asked slowly. "Your perfect shots, the ones I saw on the range." She took a deep breath, fingers lightly tracing the rim of the photograph. "They weren't just practice, they were proof. Proof that I could hit my target, proof that I was ready to face him, that I could survive whatever comes next." Hale felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't exaggerating. That morning's shots had been more than impressive, they had been a message. And if she had been sending a message, it meant someone was listening. Someone dangerous. Someone very powerful. "You understand," Hale said, his voice low, deliberate, "that you're asking me to become part of something that could get both of us killed. This isn't training. This isn't a test. This is a high-stakes hunt for a man capable of eliminating anyone who crosses him." "I understand," she said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "And I didn't come here to play it safe. I came here because you're the only one who can help me." Hale exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease slightly, though unease lingered. Evelyn wasn't just skilled. She was dangerous in a way he hadn't seen before, and the combination of her skill and determination meant that every move they made from this point forward would be critical. He stood abruptly and began packing. "We need to know everything we can about this man. Every record, every witness, every anomaly. If he's still out there, we need to understand him, predict his moves, and prepare. And right now, we have almost nothing, except for your testimony and your skill." Evelyn leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. "There's more. My father's last mission, it wasn't just covert, it was dangerous. They were working on a project, one designed to test the boundaries of human capability. The kind of intelligence and firepower that could change everything if it fell into the wrong hands. My father refused to be part of it. He walked away. And they made sure he didn't walk away alive." Hale felt his stomach tighten. He had trained soldiers, faced threats that could annihilate units, but something in Evelyn's voice and the weight of her revelation made him feel the gravity of a danger he had only glimpsed in classified reports and nightmares. "And this project," he began cautiously, "it's still active." "Yes," she said, her eyes sharp and focused. "But not in the way they intended. The program didn't die, it lives in him. And now it lives in me." Hale froze, trying to comprehend her words. "Lives in you." She nodded. "Every calculation, every shot I take, every decision, it's been influenced by what I learned from him. My father trained me to survive, to anticipate threats, to be precise, lethal, and invisible. That training, that preparation, it's now my weapon." Hale sank into his chair, the weight of responsibility pressing down. Evelyn Carter wasn't just a civilian with extraordinary skill. She was a living weapon, molded by necessity, loss, and training passed down from a father who had faced unimaginable danger. And now she was poised to confront a man who had once been untouchable. The room fell silent, the tension almost suffocating. Hale's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, contingencies. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was a different level of complexity and danger. "Admiral," Evelyn said softly, breaking the silence, "I didn't just come here to talk. I need you to understand what's at stake. If I fail, if I miss, there's no second chance. He's still out there watching, waiting, and he knows I'm coming." Hale felt the weight of her words settle over him. He had always been prepared for danger, but the certainty in Evelyn's tone, combined with the lethal precision he had witnessed on the range, made him realize that this was no ordinary mission. This was a confrontation that could alter lives, careers, and possibly even the balance of covert operations he had spent decades protecting. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, voice measured but edged with tension. "We start by gathering intel, then we strategize, and you keep preparing, every shot, every movement, but understand this, one misstep, one error, and neither of us walks away." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile, a mixture of resolve and determination. "I understand," she said, "and I'm ready." Hale nodded slowly, the chill of anticipation settling in his chest. He had trained men to face the impossible, but Evelyn Carter wasn't just facing the impossible, she was becoming it. Every movement, every shot, every decision was a step toward a confrontation that could consume them both. The photograph lay between them on the table, a silent reminder of the man who had set these events into motion. Somewhere beyond the hills, beyond the files, beyond the known world of covert operations, he waited. Evelyn's father had fallen, but she was here now, carrying the weight of vengeance, survival, and a deadly precision that few could rival. Hale leaned back, letting out a slow, measured breath. "All right," he said finally. "We'll start gathering intelligence, but mark my words, if this goes wrong, it won't just be your life at risk." Evelyn met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "I know, and that's why I need you." The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustling of papers. Outside, the range glimmered under the bright sun, a stage for the impossible. Evelyn Carter's perfect shot had been only the beginning. The real mission, the one that could change everything, was about to begin. And Admiral Hale knew, with an uneasy certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. The storm was coming, and Evelyn Carter was ready to face it. The night had fallen over the California hills, shadows stretching long and sharp under the pale moonlight. The SEAL training facility was quiet now, the earlier chaos of the range replaced by a tense, almost eerie stillness. Admiral Marcus Hale sat in a small, dimly lit briefing room, the glow of computer screens illuminating his sharp features. Beside him, Evelyn Carter leaned over maps and intelligence files, tracing routes, coordinates, and points of interest with deliberate precision. Every movement, every glance spoke of focus, determination, and readiness. "This is the area he's been operating in," Evelyn said, pointing to a stretch of rugged hills and abandoned buildings. "Satellite imagery shows recent activity, but it's intermittent, almost like he's testing something or waiting." Hale studied the terrain. The hills were perfect for concealment, natural choke points, and long-range observation. "He's smart," Hale murmured. "Every operative I've ever seen in this region would use the landscape to their advantage, but he's been off the grid for years. How do we even begin to track him?" Evelyn tapped a section of the map. "We start with patterns. Movement, wind, timing, all the things my father taught me. He won't move without reason, and he'll leave traces, small ones, but enough for those who know what to look for." Hale nodded slowly. He had always relied on instincts and experience, but Evelyn's methodical, almost clinical approach added a layer of precision he had rarely encountered. This was no longer a matter of skill. It was strategy at its highest level. "Prepare the gear," Hale said. "We move at first light, recon only, no engagement until we have a clear picture." Evelyn's eyes flicked to his, unwavering. "Understood." The hours stretched on. Hale reviewed old intelligence, cross-referenced locations, and traced every reported movement of the elusive operative. Evelyn stayed focused, working silently, her hands steady as she calculated distances, wind speeds, and elevation angles for potential long-range observation. Every calculation, every note, seemed to carry the weight of preparation and an almost obsessive precision. Hale studied her carefully. "You know this terrain, don't you?" he asked quietly. Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the maps. "Partially. I've studied it, traced every hill, every ridge, every valley. My father made sure I could navigate it before anything else. Knowledge of the land is just as critical as marksmanship." Hale leaned back, a low whistle escaping his lips. She wasn't just a marksman. She was a tactician, a hunter in every sense of the word. And the man they were hunting, he wouldn't see her coming until it was too late. By 04:30, the team was ready. Hale, Evelyn, and a small support unit moved quietly through the shadows, each step calculated, each breath measured. The hills were silent, the wind carrying faint rustles of leaves and distant wildlife. Every sense was on high alert. Evelyn led the way, her movements fluid, precise, like a shadow gliding across the terrain. Hale couldn't help but feel the weight of her confidence. She moved not with recklessness but with absolute control, a predator aware of every element of her environment. They reached a ridge overlooking a cluster of abandoned buildings just as the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Hale crouched beside Evelyn, scanning the area through binoculars. "Everything looks abandoned," he whispered. Evelyn adjusted her scope, scanning every detail. "It's a test," she said quietly. "He wants to see if I follow. He wants to see if I'm ready. This isn't where he's hiding, it's where he's observing." Hale felt a chill. The man they were hunting was not just elusive. He was calculating, watching, waiting for the right moment. And Evelyn, despite her extraordinary skill, was walking straight into his trap. Suddenly, a faint movement caught her eye, a shadow shifting near the far edge of the compound. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm. Hale noticed the subtle tightening of her jaw, the focused narrowing of her eyes. She raised her rifle but didn't fire. Instead, she whispered, "He's testing me. I can feel it. He wants me to make the first mistake." Hale nodded slowly. He had learned long ago that in these situations, patience was the deadliest weapon. "Then we wait," he said, voice low. Minutes stretched into an hour, each one charged with tension. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant caw of a crow, the soft whine of wind across the ridges. Evelyn's eyes never left the compound. She was analyzing patterns, predicting movements, calculating every possible scenario. Then a sudden flash, a glint of metal reflecting sunlight. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the trigger. Hale froze beside her. "Do not engage," he whispered sharply. She hesitated, then lowered the rifle slightly. "I know," she said softly. "He wants me to react, I won't." Hale exhaled slowly, impressed. Her restraint was as precise as her marksmanship, controlled not by fear but by strategy. The shadow moved again, this time closer to the edge of the building. Hale's support team tensed, ready to respond, but Evelyn held up a hand. "Not yet," she murmured. "We observe first, then we act." Hours passed. Every detail mattered. The position of the sun, the shifting wind, the faint tracks in the dirt. Evelyn's calculations were meticulous, her focus unbroken. Hale watched her, feeling both admiration and unease. She wasn't just hunting a target, she was predicting the moves of a ghost, anticipating danger that even he could barely comprehend. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "He's leaving." Hale squinted through his binoculars. Sure enough, a figure emerged from the compound, moving cautiously, deliberately, as if aware of every potential threat. Evelyn adjusted her scope, tracking the movement with flawless precision. "This is it," she said quietly. "The first real encounter, the first step in drawing him out." Hale felt a surge of tension. The man they had been hunting, the one responsible for her father's death, was finally moving. And Evelyn, with her unmatched skill and precise calculations, was ready to meet him head-on, but in a way he had never seen anyone capable of. "Stay sharp," Hale warned. "One mistake and it's over." Evelyn nodded, calm and resolute. "I know, and I won't miss." The shadow moved closer, unaware of the eyes tracking him from the ridge. Hale's pulse quickened as the distance closed, the tension almost unbearable. Every muscle in his body was alert, ready for the slightest sign of danger. Evelyn's finger hovered lightly on the trigger, eyes locked on the target. Hale could feel the precision, the control, the deadly anticipation radiating from her. She wasn't just preparing to shoot, she was preparing to dominate, to control every element of the encounter, to turn observation into action. Then, without warning, the shadow froze. Hale caught a flicker of movement from behind a nearby wall, another presence. Someone else had arrived. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, calculating. "He's not alone," she whispered, "but I've anticipated this. Stay close." Hale's heart pounded. The hunt had officially begun, but the rules had already changed. The man they sought was no longer simply elusive. He was lethal, aware, and ready. And Evelyn Carter, with her perfect aim and unmatched precision, was about to face a challenge that could determine the outcome of everything. The ridge was silent except for the soft hum of anticipation. Every second stretched, every detail mattered. The hunt had begun. And for the first time, Hale realized that the perfect shot might not be enough to survive what was coming. The early morning fog clung stubbornly to the ridges, curling around the hills like a restless spirit. Admiral Marcus Hale crouched beside Evelyn Carter, his binoculars trained on the compound below. The first light of dawn painted the valley in pale gold, but it did nothing to dispel the sense of foreboding that hung heavy in the air. Evelyn's finger hovered lightly on the trigger of her M107 Barrett .50, her scope trained on the shadowy figure that had emerged from the compound earlier. Hale could feel her calm, precise, and deadly intent radiating from every taut muscle. She wasn't just preparing to fire. She was anticipating every possible movement, every calculated risk, every threat, visible and hidden. "They're testing me," she whispered, barely audible. "He's waiting for me to make the first mistake, but there's another presence watching." Hale's eyes followed her gaze and caught the faint outline of a second figure slipping behind the abandoned walls, a ghost in the morning fog. "An accomplice?" he asked, voice low. Evelyn nodded. "Possibly, but that's fine. I've prepared for contingencies." Hale felt a shiver of unease. He had trained soldiers for decades, but Evelyn's composure and anticipation were something entirely new. She didn't react, she predicted. And prediction, he realized, was more lethal than reaction. The shadowed figures moved cautiously, unaware that the ridge above them held eyes sharper than any they had ever imagined. Hale noticed Evelyn's slight adjustments to the scope, her calculations invisible but precise, measuring wind shifts, light angles, and distance. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. "They're moving closer," she murmured. "Now it begins." Hale's pulse quickened. The figures approached a narrow alleyway formed by the ruins of the abandoned buildings. From this vantage point, it would be nearly impossible to engage without detection, yet Evelyn remained unmoved. She adjusted her scope, calculating trajectory with the precision of a master engineer. Suddenly, one of the figures paused and looked upward. Hale held his breath, anticipating a moment of detection. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She had expected this. Her next movements were fluid, almost imperceptible, a slow, deliberate repositioning of her body, a slight adjustment of the bipod, and a minute tweak in her scope. Then came the shot. The deafening crack of the Barrett shattered the early morning calm. The closest figure froze mid-step, a perfect strike center mass. Dust kicked up from the rubble as Hale's stomach dropped in shock. It was flawless. "Dead center," the spotter whispered from a concealed position below. Evelyn didn't celebrate. She reloaded with methodical precision, scanning for the second target. Hale noticed a faint twitch in her hands, a hint of adrenaline, carefully restrained. She wasn't just firing, she was orchestrating every element of the encounter, predicting enemy movement before it happened. The second shadow moved, cautious but purposeful. Evelyn anticipated it, adjusting for wind, distance, and potential interference. She exhaled slowly, her finger resting on the trigger. The second shot rang out, echoing through the valley. Another perfect hit. Hale exhaled, tension coiling in his chest. He had seen extraordinary shooters before, but Evelyn Carter was operating on a level beyond comprehension. She wasn't just precise, she was a strategist, a predator in human form, anticipating moves, controlling the battlefield from a distance no ordinary sniper could manage. But just as they seemed to have the upper hand, a sudden, unexpected noise erupted from the far side of the compound, a metallic clang, sharp and deliberate. Evelyn's eyes snapped to the source. Another figure had emerged, faster, more agile than the first two. Hale felt his pulse accelerate. "She's not alone," Hale muttered under his breath. "They've reinforced him." Evelyn's jaw tightened. I see it, but I've accounted for contingencies. She adjusted her scope for a third time, her mind racing through calculations at lightning speed. Stay low, she whispered to Hale. This one is dangerous, smarter than the others. The figure moved with almost inhuman precision, weaving between ruins and shadows as if reading the terrain like an extension of their own body. Hale could see the subtle training in every motion. This was no ordinary accomplice. Evelyn, however, didn't flinch. She tracked the target, predicted their route, and prepared her position for the critical shot. Suddenly, the figure ducked behind a crumbling wall and emerged with a weapon trained directly at Evelyn's position. Hale's stomach dropped. This was the moment everything could go wrong. Evelyn didn't move immediately. She exhaled slowly, keeping her body still, her eyes narrowing as she anticipated the figure's next step. Then, in a swift, fluid motion, she rolled her rifle to her shoulder and fired. The bullet struck with surgical precision, disarming the figure without causing lethal harm. Hale blinked, stunned. Non-lethal, she's controlling the outcome. Evelyn reloaded, scanning for any further threats. I need to draw him out, she whispered. All of them. The target won't reveal himself unless he thinks he has the advantage. Hale felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't just hunting. She was orchestrating, baiting, manipulating. The level of control she displayed was staggering, terrifying, and awe-inspiring all at once. Hours passed. The fog lifted slightly, sunlight beginning to warm the valley. Evelyn remained perched on the ridge, eyes unblinking, scope trained on every movement below. Hale could feel the tension coiling in his chest. Each breath, each calculation, each shot was critical. One misstep and they could lose everything. Then finally, the moment came. A single figure stepped out from the farthest building, a man moving with deliberate, confident steps, unshaken by the chaos his accomplices had faced. Hale recognized him immediately. The man responsible for Evelyn's father's death, the ghost who had eluded capture for years, was now in plain sight. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. He's here, she whispered. Everything else was preparation, now it's real. Hale felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was the confrontation they had been preparing for. Every calculation, every training session, every perfect shot had led to this instant. And Evelyn, with her unparalleled skill and steely resolve, was ready to face him head-on. The man paused, scanning the area, clearly aware of the ambush but confident in his superiority. Hale could see the faint smirk on his face, a predator recognizing another predator. Evelyn adjusted her scope, measured the wind, the distance, the angle. Hale could see her finger tighten on the trigger. She exhaled slowly, her eyes locked on the target. This is it, she whispered, the final shot. Hale felt his heart hammering in his chest. Every instinct told him to move, to intervene, to provide backup. But he stayed rooted, knowing that Evelyn had planned for this moment with precision and intelligence far beyond anything he had ever seen. She squeezed the trigger. The world seemed to hold its breath. A single crack echoed across the valley, sharp and precise. The target stumbled, then fell, not fatally, but incapacitated enough to neutralize the immediate threat. Evelyn exhaled, slowly lowering her rifle. Hale could hardly believe what he had witnessed. Not just the skill, but the strategy, the patience, the calculated restraint. She had taken down the man responsible for her father's death without unnecessary risk, controlling the battlefield from a distance, predicting every move before it happened. The fog had lifted completely now, revealing the aftermath. The accomplices were incapacitated, the target neutralized, and Evelyn stood poised, calm, and unshakable. Hale approached, his face a mixture of awe, relief, and lingering tension. You did it," he said quietly. Evelyn didn't smile. "It's not over," she said softly. "He's alive and he'll regroup, but we have the advantage now, and I'll finish what my father started." Hale nodded slowly. He had trained soldiers, faced threats, and orchestrated operations that had seemed impossible. But Evelyn Carter, she was in a league of her own, and the storm they had survived today was only the beginning. The hunt had begun in earnest, and Evelyn Carter was proving that the perfect shot was only the beginning of a war fought in shadows, precision, and deadly intelligence. The valley was silent. The morning sun had burned off most of the fog, revealing the scorched remnants of the confrontation below. Admiral Marcus Hale crouched beside Evelyn Carter on the ridge, eyes scanning the horizon. Every muscle in his body remained tense. The accomplices had been neutralized, but the man responsible for her father's death, her target, was still alive, regrouping somewhere in the shadows of the ruined compound. Evelyn's expression was calm, but Hale could sense the tension coiled beneath her composure. She was a predator, but she was also human, driven by grief, rage, and a relentless need for justice. Her M107 Barrett lay ready, scope trained on the distant shadows where her enemy could be hiding. "He's alive," Hale said quietly, "and he's smart. He'll be expecting reinforcements or escape routes." "I know," Evelyn replied softly, voice steady, eyes unflinching. "That's why this final shot has to be perfect. One chance, one calculation, one moment to end it." Hale swallowed. He had trained elite soldiers, led dangerous missions, and faced threats that could destroy entire operations, but nothing prepared him for the gravity in her eyes. Evelyn Carter wasn't just a sniper. She was a force of nature, relentless, precise, and unstoppable. The man moved again. Hale spotted the slight shift in his posture, the careful scan of the valley as he attempted to plot his escape. Evelyn adjusted her scope, calculating wind, distance, elevation, and even the subtle mirage caused by the heat of the morning sun. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, tension controlled but palpable. "Remember," Hale whispered, "this isn't just about precision. You control the battlefield, make sure you own it." Evelyn nodded, her eyes narrowing. Every calculation she had made over the past decade, every lesson from her father, every marksmanship drill, every patient observation, all of it converged in this single, pivotal moment. She exhaled slowly, aligning the crosshairs with the target. Time seemed to stretch. The valley, once alive with tension and chaos, now held a stillness that pressed against Hale's chest. The slightest movement, the faintest noise, could ruin everything. The enemy knew he was being hunted, but he didn't know how lethal his pursuer truly was. Evelyn's mind raced through possibilities, escape routes, angles of attack, wind shifts, and recoil compensation. Every potential misstep was calculated, anticipated, neutralized. Hale watched, awestruck, as her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. She squeezed the trigger. The crack of the Barrett .50 split the morning air like thunder. Hale's heart jumped into his throat. Dust kicked up at the far edge of the compound. The enemy stumbled, then collapsed into the rubble. Hale couldn't immediately discern whether it was fatal, but the target was incapacitated. Evelyn exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle. "Done," she said, almost quietly. Hale moved closer, still scanning for any remaining threats. "Is he?" "Alive," she said. "Barely, but he won't be getting up again anytime soon, and the accomplices neutralized. The immediate threat is over." For the first time, a hint of relief crossed her face, but it was fleeting. The weight of what she had done, the life she had taken to avenge her father and protect countless others, hung heavily in the air. Hale placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "Incredible precision, flawless execution, and restraint. Most would have taken unnecessary risks, but you controlled everything." Evelyn nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the distant rubble where her target lay. "It's not just about precision," she said. "It's about responsibility. Every shot I take, every decision I make, it carries consequences. My father taught me that, and now I carry it forward." Hale nodded slowly, understanding. He had spent decades making life-or-death decisions, but Evelyn Carter had taken it to a level he had rarely seen. She wasn't just a sniper. She was a strategist, a tactician, and above all, someone who understood the weight of a single action. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley in stark detail. Hale's eyes scanned the perimeter for any sign of movement, any indication that the threat wasn't over, but it was silent still. The hunt was complete, at least for now. Evelyn reassembled her rifle with methodical care, then stood, surveying the scene. Her posture was calm, controlled, but Hale could see the intensity behind her eyes, the memory of loss, the drive for justice, the quiet fury that had fueled her every action. "You're remarkable," Hale said quietly. "Not just your skill, but your mind, your discipline, your resolve. Few could accomplish what you just did." She turned to him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "I had to," she said softly. "For my father, for everyone else he couldn't protect. I had to finish what he started." Hale felt a weight settle in his chest. He had trained soldiers to be lethal, to survive impossible odds, to face death with courage. But Evelyn Carter had shown him something beyond skill. She had shown him purpose, precision, and a level of intelligence and control that few humans could ever achieve. As they began the trek back toward the ridge, Hale noticed the subtle shifts in her movements, calculated, deliberate, but undeniably human. The storm of the hunt had passed, but the echo of what had occurred lingered in the valley. Evelyn had faced the impossible, controlled it, and survived. He glanced at her, admiration and respect mixing with the residual tension. "What now?" he asked quietly. Evelyn's eyes scanned the horizon, the faintest glint of determination in her gaze. "Now," she said, "we make sure this never happens again. The threat isn't completely gone. He may have been incapacitated, but there are others, and I won't stop until everyone responsible is neutralized." Hale exhaled slowly, realizing that this was more than a mission. It was a lifelong pursuit, driven by justice, skill, and the memory of a father lost too soon. And Evelyn Carter, with her perfect shot and unparalleled precision, would lead the way. They reached the ridge, the early morning light casting long shadows across the hills. The world felt quiet, but Hale knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Evelyn Carter had faced the impossible and survived, but the war she had entered, the storm she had unleashed, would not end here. Hale watched her for a moment, nodding the calm intensity, the precision in every movement, the unwavering resolve. "You're extraordinary," he said softly. Evelyn turned, eyes meeting his. "Extraordinary?" she asked, voice calm but edged with emotion. "Maybe, but it's not about being extraordinary, it's about being relentless, about never missing, about finishing what must be finished." Hale nodded slowly. He had seen remarkable people in his life, but few like Evelyn Carter. She had combined skill, intelligence, and the weight of personal loss to create something beyond ordinary human capability. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley, the ruins, the path they had taken. Evelyn Carter had faced the impossible, executed the perfect shot, and set the stage for a new chapter, a life driven by justice, skill, and precision. And as they moved away from the ridge, Hale realized that Evelyn's story was far from over. The storm had passed, but the hunt, the danger, and the legacy of her father's mission would continue. One perfect shot had changed everything, but it was only the beginning. And Evelyn Carter, with her unwavering precision and relentless resolve, would ensure that nothing, or no one, would escape her aim again.